My name is Lily, and this is the story of how my life changed in ways I never imagined, twice. Looking back, I never would have guessed that a single night would set off a chain of events that would unravel everything I knew. But I suppose I should start from the beginning. I was born into a small, loving family. My parents, Jack and Emma, worked hard to make sure we had a good life. We lived in a quiet town where everyone knew each other. My dad was a journalist, always busy with deadlines and traveling for stories, while my mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital. We weren't rich, but we didn't need to be. Our life was simple and happy. That all changed when I turned 14. It was a rainy night, one I will never forget. My parents had gone out to a dinner party, and I was staying with my grandmother. I remember sitting on the couch, watching cartoons, when the phone rang. Grandma answered, and her face went pale. I knew something was wrong when I heard her sobbing in the kitchen. The next few days were a blur of confusion and heartache. My mother had died instantly in a car crash. My father had survived, but just barely. His legs were crushed in the wreck, and doctors told us he would never walk again. I didn't understand why this had happened to us. My dad apologized over and over when I visited him in the hospital. "I'm so sorry, Lily," he whispered weakly. At the time, I didn't know what he meant by that, but I would soon find out. After the accident, everything changed. My dad came home in a wheelchair, and we had to adjust to a new way of life. He couldn't be the father I knew anymore, the one who would toss me in the air when I was little or chase me around the park. But despite everything, he was still my dad. He threw himself into his work, editing articles from home since he couldn't go out into the field anymore. I became his shadow, helping him with things around the house, making sure he was okay. While other kids were going to parties or hanging out with friends, I stayed home with Dad. We spent our nights watching old movies and arguing about books. In some ways, our bond grew stronger, but there was always an unspoken sadness between us. We both knew life had taken a turn we never expected. As I got older, Dad encouraged me to live my life. He wanted me to go to college, make friends, and experience the world beyond our small town. "You have to spread your wings, Lily," he said. "Don't worry about me. I'll be fine." I didn't want to leave him, but I knew he was right. So, when I graduated high school, I applied to colleges far from home, hoping to give us both a chance to breathe. I ended up attending a university a few hours away. It wasn't too far, but it felt like a world apart. That's where I met my best friend, Emma. She was outgoing and full of life, the complete opposite of me. Through Emma, I met her cousin, Nick. He was kind and had a warm smile that made me feel safe. Nick didn't hesitate when I told him about my dad. In fact, he was excited to meet him. When Nick met my dad, the two hit it off immediately. They spent hours talking about classic rock and old movies, bonding over their shared interests. For the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe life could be normal again. Maybe I could have the kind of happiness I thought was lost forever. After college, Nick and I started dating more seriously. He was a truck driver, often on the road, but we made it work. 4 years later, on a crisp autumn evening, Nick proposed. I was overjoyed, but there was one thing I needed to make clear. "I can't leave my dad," I told him. "He needs me." Nick smiled softly. "We'll make it work, Lily. We'll all live together. Your dad's part of the family, too." Our wedding was small and intimate. My dad insisted on wheeling himself down the aisle to give me away. It was a moment I'll never forget. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. I held Nick's hand, feeling like my life was finally falling into place. But as with all fairy tales, there was a dark side waiting to rear its head. Nick's mother, Anna, and his sister Laura didn't approve of me from the start. During our first meeting, Anna wrinkled her nose when I mentioned my dad's disability. "So, your father is handicapped?" she asked with a tone of disgust. "He's disabled," I corrected, trying to stay calm. But Anna didn't care. She made it clear she thought Nick could do better and that I wasn't good enough for her son. After the wedding, Anna and Laura made themselves scarce, which was fine by me. Nick moved in with Dad and me, and we found our own rhythm. Nick was often away for days at a time because of his job, but when he was home, the three of us would have dinner together and laugh about our day. It wasn't perfect, but it was our version of happiness. But every time Anna and Laura visited, tension filled the air. They acted like they owned the place, barely acknowledging Dad's presence. One day, I overheard Anna whispering to Laura, "Paul could have done so much better. Now he's stuck with that girl and her crippled father. What if they have children? Can you imagine the genes?" The words stung, but I stayed quiet for Nick's sake. I didn't want to cause trouble, even though I could feel resentment bubbling under the surface. But that all changed one evening, when Anna crossed a line I couldn't ignore. We had just moved into a new townhouse, one that was more accessible for Dad. It was perfect, wide doorways, a roll-in shower, and a beautiful garden that Dad loved. We decided to throw a housewarming party, inviting friends, family, and yes, even Anna and Laura. I hoped this would be a chance for them to see how happy we were, but I was wrong. Anna and Laura showed up late, as usual, walking through the house with looks of disdain. As we made our way to the master bedroom, Anna turned to me with a sly smile. "You know, this room would be perfect for Nick and me," she said quietly. "Why don't you put your father in a nursing home? Then I could move in here." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Excuse me?" I managed to say. "Oh, don't look so shocked," she continued. "Your father isn't well. He doesn't need all this space. A nursing home would be better for someone like him." Before I could respond, Anna marched outside to where Dad was sitting in his wheelchair, enjoying the party. To my horror, she grabbed the handles of his chair and started pushing him toward the driveway. "What are you doing?" I shouted, running after her. "If he won't go to a nursing home, he can stay outside," she sneered. "That's what you wanted, right? For him to be outdoors?" I was shaking with anger. Just then, Nick came outside, his face red with rage. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? Let go of his chair." Anna looked shocked by Nick's tone, but she didn't argue. She and Laura left the party in a huff, and I hoped that would be the end of it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. As the months passed, Nick's job took him on more long-haul routes, leaving me and Dad alone for days at a time. I miss Nick, but I was used to being the one to hold things together. One evening, as I was helping Dad into bed, Nick called with an idea. "How would you feel about buying a new house?" he asked. "It would be easier for your dad to get around, and we could have a garden for you." The idea sounded perfect. We found a lovely townhouse that had everything we needed: wide doorways, a roll-in shower, and a beautiful backyard where Dad could enjoy the fresh air. It felt like a new beginning. But that sense of peace didn't last long. One night, I got a call from the police. Nick had been in an accident. His truck collided with another vehicle on a rainy highway, and he didn't survive. The news shattered me. I felt like my heart had been ripped out, leaving a hole I couldn't fill. The day of Nick's funeral was cold and gray. Friends and family gathered to pay their respects, but I couldn't stop looking around for Anna and Laura. They didn't show up. They hadn't even bothered to come to their own son and brother's funeral. After the service, Dad held my hand as we drove home in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. The lights were on in the house. I was sure I had turned them off before we left. My stomach twisted with unease. As we entered the house, I heard voices, familiar voices. Anna and Laura were inside, packing up our things. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. Anna turned to me, her face calm and composed. "We're just helping you pack," she said sweetly. "Now that Nick is gone, you won't be able to afford this place. You might as well move back into your father's apartment." I was speechless. How could they be so heartless? "Get out of my house," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "This is my home. You have no right to be here." Anna didn't flinch. "Oh, but we do," she said smugly. "Nick's gone and we're his family. We'll be taking over now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These women had shown no love for Nick, and now they wanted to take everything from me. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. For the first time, Anna looked worried. She and Laura quickly gathered their things and left, but not before Anna turned to me with a warning. "This isn't over." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, grief, and fear. I didn't know what Anna and Laura would try next. But then, one day, I got a call from Nick's lawyer. To my surprise, Nick had left everything to me in his will. The house, his savings, and even a letter explaining his love for me and Dad. Nick had thought of everything, even making sure I was protected from his mother and sister. As I read his letter, tears streamed down my face. Even in death, Nick was taking care of us. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but the hardest part was still to come. A few weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought a mix of emotions, grief, joy, and fear. But as I stood in the garden, thinking about the future, I realized that this child was a gift from Nick, a piece of him that would live on. When Anna and Laura found out I was pregnant, they showed up again, this time asking for help. "We're struggling," Anna said, her voice softer than before. "We need a place to stay. Could we live in your dad's old apartment?" I looked at them, feeling a strange sense of peace. "I'm sorry," I said. "That's not possible. Please leave." They didn't argue this time. As they drove away, I felt like I was finally free. Free from their cruelty, free from the past. With Dad by my side and Nick's child growing inside me, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We had survived the worst, and now it was time to rebuild.